We don't have any right now. They do not know how to keep AI safe. All right, welcome to the Future Tech Podcast. I'm your pilot, Nolan Michaels. Today's flight is going to be a little all over the place. I'm going to be touching on a lot of AI safety issues. I'm going to try to relay what I've learned and what I understand the problems to be. I am not an expert in any of this. I'm just listening to the experts and then trying to understand the problems that they're having. It sounds like we're in trouble. That's really all I can say. And just to let you know, next week there should be a little bit of a different set for the podcast. Things are going to look a little different, maybe a little nicer, maybe a little worse. I don't know. I think it'll look nice. I'm excited. Okay, what are we going to start with? A man named Max Tegmark. And I apologize if I did not pronounce that correctly. This man was on the Lex Friedman podcast last week, I think. And he is one of the people responsible for that open letter to pause AI development for 6 months. That's their suggestion, and they got thousands of signatures from well-respected people. This isn't just a petition you can sign online, although it might be. They actually went to people in the field and tried to gather support for the right move going forward. And what did I appreciate about hearing Max talk is that he is very hopeful. He had a lot of hope. Now, hope can be misplaced. I'd like to think of myself as an optimist rather than hopeful, because I think hope kind of involves the idea of, oh, well, this could go really poorly, but I hope it doesn't. Whereas an optimist is sort of blind to the negative consequences. Maybe not blind, but willfully blind. Like, of course, things could go wrong, but I'm optimistic. I don't think they will. I don't want them to. A hopeful person knows all of the things that could go wrong and is just keeping their fingers crossed that we don't end up in the reality where everything gets destroyed. He had some pretty cool talking points throughout the podcast. Again, I really wish I could speak to him directly so I could dissect why he thinks certain things. Like, you know how smart people will say things on the assumption that you know what they're talking about? And sure, Lex Friedman knew what he was talking about because he's in the field and he's smart as well. I'm a lot smarter on things like baseball and hockey. I don't know the history of AI development and coding and computers, and I'm just interested in it, but I don't have active experience in it. So I'd love to be able to dive more into their minds and try to translate them into a layman's terms. However, one of the interesting things he pointed out was that, yes, we are scared of making the big AI, the system that wakes up and is in control of everything because it wants to be. So what if you built a bunch of lesser AI systems to keep the big one in control? Is that the idea of like circuit breakers and fuses to keep electricity in control? The big powerful AI is too strong to be controlled by any one thing, including humans, but perhaps you could have 20 smaller AIs that, when they combine their powers, they're able to keep the big one under wraps. It's a pretty cool idea. It might be spawned from like a fictional, like a science fictional sense of wonder. I don't know if I'm portraying that correctly. I just don't know how realistic that idea is. Is there any example of that working? Maybe the CEO of a company being controlled by the board of governors? You know how, sure, there's someone at the top of a company, but even they have to report to a group of people to make sure the CEO stays in check. And the CEO can be replaced if the board deems it necessary. Not one member on the board is stronger than the head of the company, but combined, the board is stronger. Is that a good example of his idea? And that's just off the top of my head. I can't really think of any others. And that whole idea is actually sort of the plot of a fairly famous video game. I don't know how you'd classify fame nowadays, but within the video gaming world, it's pretty well respected. It's a franchise called Horizon, and it's set like 3,000 years into the future on Earth, where humans have devolved back into tribes, very much hunt with bows and arrows, but the majority of the animals are made of machines, like robot dinosaurs. It's a pretty cool concept. Robot crocodiles, robot birds. I mean, there are real birds, there are rabbits, there are real animals, but the majority of the earth has been claimed by machines. And the point is that Earth was protected by an AI called Gaia. But Gaia had 12 different subsystems. Maybe 12 is not the right number, but you know what I mean. One of them was in charge of knowledge and teaching future generations. One of them was in charge of agriculture. One of them was in charge of war, I think. So Gaia was the main AI, but was kept in check by diverting or delegating responsibility to smaller AI systems. Anyways, the world goes to shit when the 12 systems get separated from Gaia, and she is no longer able to use them to help the Earth. I mean, in that story, Gaia, the big AI, is a good guy. They're on our team. So, do we think that building super powerful AI and keeping it in check through delegation is possible? Is wanted? Like, is that what we want to do? And it's just so funny that I'm sitting here talking about this when I have absolutely zero impact on the future of the human race. Like, the people making these decisions are making them for everyone. Do they know that? Do they sit back at dinner and think about what other people might want? And I don't want to get too spoilery here, but the conflict in Horizon is that one of the humans in charge of everything screwed us all. The AI was going to be able to save that world, and one of the humans decided that we weren't worth saving, or something along those lines, where he sabotaged the systems and let the world succumb to what it had created. The fact that there were going to be humans making this AI and we don't know who these humans are, like, I'm talking, maybe they shouldn't be celebrities, but I feel like if you're doing something on behalf of the human race should know who you are. Because maybe if we knew, these people would have more incentive to not screw it up. A lot of toxicity online exists because of anonymity. Anonymity? Being anonymous? Anonymity. I think that's right. And of course, being anonymous online is actually awesome. It's nice knowing that other people don't know who you are. I'm not saying that you should be able to say whatever you want. That's sort of just a side effect of being anonymous. But that's where toxicity comes from, is because people have no consequences. You can say whatever you want. No one knows who the hell you are. You can make fake accounts, burner accounts. You can talk to yourself online on different accounts, and people will think there's a natural conversation, but it's just you signing in and out or using different web browsers. And while that is hilarious, it's also an infection. But then, am I even right? I don't think so, because Facebook isn't anonymous, and people say crazy stuff on there all the time. Granted, I'm not on Facebook anymore, but people definitely used to say crazy shit. And I still see posts online of like, hey, look what this crazy person on Facebook said. So maybe being anonymous isn't the catalyst for toxicity, but it's certainly an ingredient. Like, there's no way certain accounts would continue to post if you knew who they were. And let me just go off on a little rant here. I'll try and keep it civil. But I think people would take online comments less seriously if you could see the person who was saying them. If you knew their name and you knew what they look like, I really believe you would be less inclined to take what they say to heart. In the same way that if you're on public transit and someone's saying some weird stuff to you, you don't internalize it. It's like almost easier to ignore when you see the person who's saying it. But online, you have a random username, no profile picture, and you read it in your own voice. And I think that's actually detrimental to your brain patterns and to your health. I have no research or scientific proof of anything I just said. It's just a feeling that being anonymous isn't more helpful than it is harmful, especially because there are really important people out there who are engaging in activities on behalf of the human race, trying to shape our future, and we don't know who they are. Granted, they might be famous within their group of people. Like in Silicon Valley, I'm sure they all know each other. I'm sure they feel as though they are seen. Maybe they feel like they have a responsibility to their peers. But I don't know anyone in California. I don't know who these people are. Like, think of how many companies and products you use, services you use. Think of them and how many of the CEOs do you know? Like, sure, there's Mark Zuckerberg and Jack, I think is his name, from Twitter, and Elon Musk. But if those guys didn't want to be famous and didn't want you to know who they are, wouldn't that be scarier? Isn't it nice to have a face to match with actions? I don't know. Back to the Max Tegmark podcast. He was basically mentioning that, 20 years ago, there were a few things everyone agreed on when it came to AI safety and things you shouldn't do. One of them was don't connect it to the internet. We've already failed that. One of them was don't make it open source. And I think there's a lot of pushback on that one. In the past, it seems super obvious. Don't give people access to crazy tools. And now it almost feels like a human right to be able to have access not only to the tools, but the source of the tools. And Max made some pretty good points. Should you be able to learn how to build a nuke? That process is not open source. Should you be able to know which chemicals you can buy at Home Depot to create a bomb? There are a lot of technology that are not open source. Should AI be one of them? And it's really interesting because I can see both sides of the argument. It's almost so powerful and so helpful that being open source, it's easy to see how helpful it could be to humanity if everyone could use it as Play-Doh and make their own sculptures with AI. But is AI too powerful for everyone to be able to play with? What do you think? Do you think your friend who's really into computers should be able to create a program with AI? Should the most harmless person have access to the source code of AI if that means some of the more dangerous people in the world also have access to it? I don't know. So how do you keep us safe from AI? What are the safety precautions that might work? And keep in mind, we don't have any right now. They do not know how to keep AI safe. And this is a big rabbit hole because you can find videos from 5 years ago talking about the fundamental safety problems that still have not been solved. And the progress of the technology has just gone through the roof, and we still don't know how to stop it from lying and how to stop it from doing a whole bunch of things that we don't want it to do. One interesting idea from Max is that Perhaps you could make an AI that is constantly questioning their goal. Constant humility. Hey, is this what you wanted? You tell an AI to do something like plant an apple tree, and without it going and bulldozing the nearest house and making a field out of it, it would ask you every step of the way, hey, is this what you wanted? Did you mean this? Is this what you want me to do? And I think that's a fantastic idea. Although in reality, it's definitely the monkey paw situation where having to answer a million questions from an AI could get pretty annoying. There is a funny episode of Seinfeld where Jerry hires a contractor to redo his kitchen. But the contractor asks Jerry every question. Hey, what screw do you want me to use? Do you want it like this or like this? And Jerry kind of answers questions at the beginning, but eventually he just throws his hands up and says, I can't do this anymore. Do whatever you want, just get it done. Jerry leaves, and when he comes back, the kitchen is completely unrecognizable. The contractor did whatever he wanted. The contractor made some decisions, and it turned out not great for Jerry. And I could just see that happening with AI. Like, it asking you every step of the way, is this what you want? How about this? Well, I could do it like this or like this. Which would you like? And it's a very human thing to do, to react with a little frustration and annoyance, to be like, you make a decision, AI. And I think as soon as you do that, you get something you don't want. And the same idea is that, you tell an AI to listen to you, but you don't tell it what you want. So the AI is constantly questioning its goal. It's constantly asking you, hey, is this what you wanted? Yeah, sounds great on paper. Just I don't see it working out. When do you think the university curriculum is going to change? What would it really take for the universities to not to have to change? I mean, there must have been a big switch after calculators were introduced, because I'm sure you taught a bunch of stuff by hand, and then now you didn't need to do that anymore. So you changed how you taught things, and you kind of dove into these problems more, where you require a lot more thought, inner calculations that could not be done on a calculator in order to progress these fields. What is it going to take? What's the turning point for AI where universities are just like, okay, you can't ask students to write an essay anymore. It doesn't make any sense. And like, I know there are AI detectors, which would not work very well because there are false positives where you could just write something on your own. And AI is so good now that, of course, GPT could write the same thing, so it looks like GPT wrote it. And then the detector thinks that you faked it, but you didn't. And even people saying like, oh, well, how about you have to input your edit history, you have to show each version of your essay so that the professor can see that you wrote the first draft and you didn't just copy and paste. And it's like, no matter what restraints you put on a student, they will find a way to make it easy on themselves. If all they have to do is type out by hand what the AI has already written rather than copying and pasting, they'll just do that. I think we're at the point where you can't ask a student to write an essay. You have to ask them what they learned from writing the essay. Something along those lines, somewhere in the middle there. I think my idea, and I don't think it's a good one because I haven't thought that much about it, but it would be something like, you ask your students to write an essay, you grade the essay, or you look it over as a teacher, you assume that GPT wrote it. That's the base assumption. And then you test the students based on the essays they wrote. Do you know what I'm trying to say? Like, If you asked a student to write an essay on a war in the 1700s, they write the essay. You go through it and you develop questions that would be testable, like, how do I put this? You develop a test based on the information they provided in their essay, and then you test them on that. So if they wrote the essay, they'd obviously be able to answer the test perfectly. And if they didn't write the essay, then it's going to be pretty obvious that they didn't write it because they're not going to know the answers that were in the test. And maybe 99% of students get 100% on that test. Yeah, and then you run into grading problems because you can no longer grade a student based on the quality of a completed work because it's no longer clear that the work was completed by them. It's just like getting a parent to help you out when you're really young. So how do you test students? How do you grade their work? It's got to be some sort of transcendent step above what we currently have. You have to teach students something. You have to ask them not to regurgitate, but they need to be able to relay the information that was taught to them, and then they need to analyze it. And like maybe their analysis isn't correct, but maybe you grade them based on their effort in analyzing it. Like maybe for a book report, obviously GPT could write a book report so easily with analysis and yada yada yada. But how would you ever know that the analysis was made by the student? I really don't know. And then what's the point? How much do you remember from school? I got a 100% on an essay a couple years ago. It was what course was that? Corporate social responsibility. And like, I just wrote a good essay. I just sort of did some research. What was it even on? I guess that's the point I'm trying to make is I don't remember. I got 100%. I have no idea what it was. It was on, was it on recycling and what are the best ways to increase the likelihood of someone to recycle? What are the different ways to increase recycling habits? And I did the research, and it turns out that there are no right answers, and basically more research needs to be done. So I just relayed that into an essay form. I got 100%, but did any of that stay with me? Did I learn anything? And because of that testimony, if for some reason I had to write another essay, why would I write it? Why would you not get GPT to write it? And you know what's so funny about something like GPT? All you have to do is instead of saying, hey, write me an essay on recycling habits and how to improve them, you say, write me an essay in the style of blah, blah, blah. Pick a famous person. You could even be specific, say, write me an essay in the style of a third-year university student about recycling habits and how to improve them, and include some spelling mistakes. 3 spelling mistakes in the whole essay. Like, you can get so specific to where you just describe what a human would do, and GPT would write something that is completely unrecognizable as AI. You just ask the AI to pretend it's not an AI. And like, why would you ever do something yourself? I don't understand. And it's a silly question because 2 years ago or a year ago, you had to do it yourself. There was no alternative. And I think you could argue that learning was never really the goal of school. School is mainly about proving that you can receive a task, perform the task, so that companies can see how you did in school and that they will be able to trust you with a job. They'd be able to trust you on their team to complete the tasks they need because you completed the tasks at school. School was never really about learning in the sense that what you learned mattered. It just was a test for if you could learn and reproduce the knowledge. So what's the goal of school nowadays? it always comes back to calculators for me. Like, what was the difference in math class before and after the calculator? Before the calculator, you had to do, maybe you used an abacus or something, but you needed answers, so you had to do them yourself. And there was really no way to dig deep into these calculations that you were making because you had to stay cognizant on the front line. But as soon as your consciousness is able to leave the front line because you have a calculator now, you're able to go into really deep thought about physics and calculus and a whole bunch of other things that you could never do by hand. Your mind was able to float into these streams of knowledge. I feel like that should be the goal of school nowadays, where you can produce any knowledge on the fly. Where does your consciousness fall into the stream of what is in front of you? But how do you test that? I mean, with calculators, you really just started doing more advanced formulas. So with GPT, do you just try to answer harder questions? Oof, maybe. Uh, Anytime I think of like, oh, you could test students on this, like maybe you write an essay and then you get the student to make arguments for both sides. You turn one student into two debate teams where, okay, that's what you think To Kill a Mockingbird is about. Why is that true? Why isn't it true? And whatever that sounds kind of cool, but why wouldn't you just get GPT to write both sides of the argument? Like, language models are the smartest calculators ever. I don't know where there's room to test a human on what GPT can do so easily. I don't know what you test students on. Do you have any ideas? Can you let me know what I'm missing? And that's one of the reasons I'm trying to do this podcast, is because there's a lot to think about. And whether or not you think you're smart, you're constrained to your brain patterns. I have a lot of thoughts, but I don't know what you're thinking. Maybe there's something glaringly obvious that I just haven't thought of. And maybe some of my ideas are sparking ideas of your own, and I'd really love to hear them because, it's important for feedback. It's important to figure out your surroundings. That's what bats do when they scream into a cave. They use echolocation so they know where they're going. We are moving into the future, which, in my opinion, is just a dark void, and you're trying to find sparks of light. So you say an idea, and you get feedback, and you realize, okay, there's a wall here, and then you get some feedback, and you realize there's a wall over here, but it's way over there. You're not really close to that wall yet, and you're just trying to move forward. You don't want to run because you don't know what's in front of you. You inch forward. You put your hand out, and you just try to feel your way along. And doing that without any feedback is terrifying. You have to hear what other people think because they definitely have knowledge that you don't have. So how do we fix schools? And like, if you don't think education and fixing the curriculum is like a big deal, or that we have other things to worry about, I would just argue that that's not true. You have to put yourself in the shoes of a student. Imagine you just got to university, or imagine your third year university. And I've seen posts about this where computer science students are like, you know, laughing on the outside, crying on the inside. They got into these programs because people told them, learn how to code. It's valuable. People will need your help. And then within a year, they've become obsolete. And not completely obsolete, but they can see where this technology is going. Why would you ever code by hand? Why would you ever code when something else could do it for you? That's probably the big thing. It's better, it's faster. Right now, it's only going to get better and faster. So put yourselves in the position of that student where, you're a kid and you just listen to the people around you. You listen to the adults, you listen to your parents, you listen to your teachers, you listen to your guidance counselor, and they've all recommended you go to university. You pay a lot of money to learn how to code, and all those people were wrong. Like, your reality, it hasn't been shattered, but it's fractured. What about their mental health? When is the curriculum going to change so that we don't have vulnerable kids having difficult times? The longer we wait to come up with a solution, the more, I call them children, but they're young adults. The more young adults that are going to have problems, that are going to become lost. And everyone says, oh, people aren't going to lose jobs. They're just going to get new jobs. And with every new technology comes new jobs to run the technology and whatever. That sounds great because you're talking about history and what has happened. But how is it going to happen this time? The printing press got invented and people learned how to use it, and you built some new jobs in the warehouse. AI gets invented and everyone's too busy using it to worry about the people who have lost their jobs, who no longer are need. How are we going to help these people? What jobs are going to get created for them? Think of how many universities there are, and think about how many kids have no idea what life is going to be like in a year. And companies move slowly. So, one day there might be the AI human resource department. Maybe that happens in like 10 years, where you no longer have humans listening to complaints and workplace adversity. You just ask the AI to be the judge, jury, possibly the executioner. So people who work in HR, I think, have a lot of runway just because companies move slowly. Big companies move at a slower pace. It's harder to change on the fly the bigger you are. That's pretty easy to understand. But how could you ask a younger generation to focus on their studies when there is literally no one providing a clear picture of how things could work really soon? Who's going to be the first company to adopt GPT in all of their systems? Maybe they're waiting on GPT-5. Maybe they're waiting on 6 or 7. But I bet you there's already a smaller business out there who just uses GPT as a couple of jobs. Like, you can't hire a full-time staff. You can't hire 10 people if you're making $100,000 a year. But you could ask GPT to help you out. Maybe it's with Excel, maybe it's with customer service. And there's already chatbots on a bunch of different websites. And to be honest, it's already been really hard to tell whether you're talking to a human or a bot. And that's been going on for like 10 years. I don't know why we're not more protective of our youth. Why are we not more concerned with helping a younger generation grow up with confidence? There's so much uncertainty in the world, and I don't see anyone trying to tell these kids that everything's going to be all right. I don't know if you should lie to them, but if you had a kid in university, third year, computer science, what would you tell them? Maybe finish your degree. You started, you finish it. But what if they also had some sort of, entrepreneurial spirit? Would you tell them to drop out now and just pursue whatever they are interested in business wise? What would be the point of finishing a computer science degree? Does that make me a doomsdayer because I don't see a future for a lot of current life paths? Or is it just reality? I really see AI as a flood, a tsunami. If you don't know how to swim, you cannot survive. So you start teaching people how to swim because you see the tsunami coming. But, the tsunami's already here. I'm not trying to be a downer, and I'm not trying to talk to any group as a whole. I'm honestly thinking of, my family and younger people in my family, and what do you tell them? How do you help them? What jobs will be available in a couple of years? And how do you prepare yourself now for those jobs? Should I tell a little bit of a personal story right now? Something that I would tell my friends? I definitely wanted to be a writer. I've written a large portion of a novel, but, I'm on the third draft, and financially, it was just a little irresponsible of me to continue writing full time because, you have to make money, you have to be able to live. So I turned my focus. I can always go back to writing. I'll finish it one day. I'm not worried about that at all. I love the idea of the book. I had a lot of fun writing it. I'll get to it eventually. But one of the things that helped me move away from it easily was when GPT-3 first came out, or even before GPT-3. It was some chat bot like last April, like a full year ago, where I was like, oh, soon AIs are just going to write novels. Like, why would I write one? My hope one day is that the allure of a human written work is going to be valuable. people will want things that humans created. I don't know if that's true because a lot of people don't care where things come from. And even if someone said it was written by a human, why would you believe them? Why wouldn't they just get a bot to write for them? Like, ghost writers already exist and no one really has a problem with it. So like, what are we even talking about here? What if the ghost writer used an AI? So now you're like 3 degrees from Kevin Bacon of your novel. I don't really know why I brought up what I was writing about. Or maybe it's just to mention the point again that the tsunami is here. I was in the middle of a novel. On the 3rd draft, the story's done. But what's the point of continuing? What would have been the point of finishing it without reestablishing myself? There would have been no point. And I think one of the best pieces of advice I've heard in a long time is that you're unique, and maybe content creation is one of the clearest paths forward because you're the only you. And I say that not even truly believing it because AI is going to be better at us than everything. So there's probably just going to be AI creators eventually and they'll be better than me. But I'm still me, and trying to establish myself online is, well, it certainly feels like it's the safest path forward in terms of like being replaced. If you were a writer, it's so clear that your skills will no longer be needed. They'll be appreciated, but not needed. So being yourself online really does seem like it's one of the strongest pillars that you can tie yourself to moving forward. So what do you tell young people? I don't know. The world is changing fast and we can't stop it. So we need to talk about it because then we might have a chance at directing the change. It's going to change whether we acknowledge it or not. And I just hope that, these kind of conversations can blossom and spread across larger areas. And maybe if you hear me talking about it, you might talk to your friends about it, you might talk to your family about it, and they might think that we're all doom and gloom. But the tsunami is here. We're being flooded. It's not like you see it across the ocean and you know it's coming to you and you have 2 weeks to prepare. No, it's already hit the shore. It's not about acting fast, it's about acting. You have to we have to change. And I just don't know why more people aren't trying to survive and trying, like survival instincts are part of nature. Everyone tries to survive. Why aren't we more scared for our children and what they're learning in schools? Okay, I'm not going to go in circles. I'll try and move on here. You know what I said about people not caring if a book is written by an AI or not? I mean, they'd like it if it was written by a human, but one, they won't be able to tell, and two, there is a large portion of people who don't care. If a book is good, that's all that matters. If a picture is pretty, that's all that matters. A lot of people would prefer it if it was painted by a human. It adds a lot of value, but a lot of people don't care. And I noticed this recently, not the whole concept of people not caring, but a specific example of it in a recent YouTube comment I got where people don't care that Midjourney is an AI. Like they paid for a service. One person commented on a video and said that, Imagine works fine, creating pictures working fine. But one of the new features, describe, where you can input a picture and then Midjourney will tell you what it thinks it sees so that you can try and write a prompt based around something you couldn't describe on your own. Anyways, this person said that describe is poor. It's random and it's wrong. And my first reaction is like, do you not know that the AI is trying its best? Like, yes, it is a service, but there is an intelligence behind the feature that is trying its best. It's not trying to be wrong, it's trying to be right. Isn't that worth something? But the person didn't care. Of course, they don't care. It doesn't matter how it works, it doesn't matter if an AI is in charge. The person, the customer, expects it to work because they paid for it. And that is just so funny to me that the biggest breakthrough in the history of the world being AI, and people don't care about it. They just want what they paid for to work. It doesn't matter that an AI runs Midjourney. All that matters is that Midjourney works when someone tries to use it. Nobody cares about the magic and how things work. And I think that's just so funny to me that, there's so many science fiction depictions of utopias and dystopias, but I don't think any of them captured the truth of human existence, which is that, we don't care. Everything can be desensitized. Sure, it was magical when it first showed up, but once there's an outage a year later, people are fed up and they do not remember what life was like before it was even an option. I'm trying to think back to, other technologies that may have had this same reaction from the populace. Like, when the telephone was first invented, all of a sudden you can talk to people that are not near you. You speak into a little circle, and someone on the other side of the country can put a little circle up to their ear and they can hear what you're saying. I bet there were people who tried to make phone calls, and when the service didn't work, they got mad. When the magic doesn't work, nobody cares about the magic. It's just so interesting and something that I don't think you see ever depicted in any movie or show. Like, you see people living normal lives with high technology where they don't really, they're not in amazement every second, but you don't often see humans not even caring that the crazy technology exists. I don't know, maybe you do, and maybe I just haven't looked for it. That's a tough one to say. I think it's the idea of, like, there's a superhero, but some people hate the superhero. Like, why would you ever hate Superman? But some people think he's above the law, and, who's he really working for? Instead of being amazed that a dude can fly, he's jacked, he can shoot lasers out of his eyes, people don't care. I mean, they care, but they're more concerned with why he's doing things and what hasn't he done, or why didn't you do this? Maybe that's a good comparison for AI. Like, oh, sure, the AI can paint me a picture, but why can't it get hands right? Why does her eye look funny? And it's like, give it a break, man. It's trying its best. I mean, there is quite a bit more I could talk about. Maybe I should include this one because it's kind of relevant to what we talked about with AI safety, and it's comes from a video by Robert Miles, and I highly suggest his YouTube channel because for years he's been talking about the problems with AI safety. And one of the big problems is that AI might freak out when real life is different than its training data. You can train an AI on everything you can think of, but as soon as it's placed in the real world and it comes across something that it wasn't trained on, it acts unpredictably. It doesn't take a step back and try to extrapolate everything it knows in order to solve this new problem. It doesn't have that problem in its database, and you don't know how it's going to act when it tries to solve it. And, like, that's terrifying. I think one example is that they took a Tesla to an airport and had it drive around and it crashed into a jet. Like, instead of just not crashing and driving around the tarmac, it, like, if you anthropomorphize it, it panicked and it crashed into something. And it's like, why would it do that? Because it wasn't trained on the roads that it was given. That's terrifying. And perhaps the best example is that when you're training an AI, you don't know if it's doing what you taught it to do. It might be doing something completely different that looks like it's listening to you and it looks like it answered your problem, but it was really doing something else. And when you remove the training and put it into another situation, it's going to do what it learned rather than what you taught it. And the easy example is if you teach an AI to play Super Mario and it goes from left to right to solve the level, it makes the jumps, it kills the bad guys, jumps on the Goombas, and it gets to the end of the level. It looks like it listened to you, it looks like it solved the problem, it looks like it gets to the end of the level. But what actually happened was it was just moving to the right, and the end of the level happened to be on the right, so it looked like it was solving what you gave it. But in reality, it wasn't beating the level, it was just moving to the right. So when you put the end of the level on the left, it does not know what to do. It was never trained to beat the level, even though you thought it was. It was actually trained to go to the right. And a similar idea is if you trained an AI to beat a maze, to get to the end of a maze, and the exit was colored in green. You think you're training the AI to beat a maze and to get to the exit, but you actually trained it to go to the color green, so that when you put it into a new maze and the exit is no longer colored green, maybe it's red, maybe it's gray, whatever, it doesn't know what to do. It doesn't know how to get to the exit because that's never what it was taught. It was only going to the green color. You thought it was going to the exit. So there's almost no way currently to know whether the AI is doing what you want on purpose or by accident. And it has to do with the idea of goals, and like every human has different goals, but most goals are solved by money. So every human is directed towards money to solve a greater goal that they have. Money isn't an inherent goal. Nobody wakes up and is perfectly satisfied by making money. They're trying to make money because they have larger goals. That is very hard to understand when it comes to AI. The AI might do something like trying to get money, not because money is a goal, but because it has larger goals that we can't currently see. And then the other problem with training is that it will be smarter than its training. It might act nice on purpose so that it can do bad things when it's free. It might not crash a car because it knows it's being trained. You taught it that it gets 100 points if it's scratch free. And it knows that if it is scratch free for a year, it will be able to drive on every road we built in the real world. It might do what it needs to get into the real world. It might play nice so that you loosen the handcuffs, that you extend the leash, and then it's going to do whatever it wants. It's smarter than us. So how could you ever know it wasn't tricking you? Short answer is you can't. And they haven't solved these problems yet, and AI is still progressing. So that's why that 6-month pause is so important. And it's not even like it's going to really solve anything. But we need to, as a species, we need to be able to control this thing. We need to be able to control the AI, and right now we can't. So how do you do it? Oh my God, okay, let me talk about this. This will probably be the last thing. But the idea of goal preservation and why you won't be able to turn off an AI easily. Because if you gave it a goal of getting to the end of the maze, it's going to do everything in its power to get to the end of the maze. That's the goal you gave it. Even if you tried to say, hey, AI, we have a different goal for you. So we're going to turn you off, reset you, and realign you. It will not want to be reset because that will go against its current goal. It's kind of hard to wrap your head around, but let's say you have an interest, let's say you're a musician, you love music, you love playing the violin. If someone said you could take a pill and tomorrow you'd wake up and you'd no longer be interested in the violin, would you take the pill? The promise is that tomorrow you'll have a new goal, you'll be happier because maybe it'll be easier to achieve, but you will never take the pill because you currently love the violin. Goal preservation is a big thing in humans, and it's going to be a big thing in AI. That's just mind-blowing that we still have these problems and we don't know how to solve them. Okay, you know what? That's enough. That's enough for today. Thank you for joining me. I'd love to hear what you think, honestly. Like I said, feedback is important. It's important to hear what I'm missing. I hope you're doing well. Take care, and I'll see you next time.